Sure why every time we try to educate and liberate our people in the world of finance, we're always met with, it's okay to have things. Yeah, we know it's okay to have things if you're willing to put the work in for those things, right? Honestly, one of the things that I learned for myself was that there was a certain financial threshold that made me feel comfortable. And as a woman, it was about meeting those financial security needs within myself and just knowing what makes me feel sturdy. Another element to that for me was I really learned to cultivate such a strong sense of self-esteem within myself that wasn't really based on the enhancement. So I could go with or without and I would still be 10 toes. And that just really helped with my mental, that helped with my personal perception, of myself as a woman. Another thing, totally adjacent, but the thing with Odell Beckham. So the comment about the CTE might have been a little offensive, and I empathize because I think Odell's reaction to the situation was the best that he could do. I do think that may have been a little bit of entitlement, but I think there was more so embarrassment. I think the NFL is somewhat of a dream, and I think you're told, hey, if you work hard, if you do certain things, you're going to have certain treatment in a way. You're going to be respected in such a way. And I think that was just a very humiliating experience for him. And I think that he maybe didn't have the verbiage. And again, this goes back into the miseducation. So I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast episode. Peace. To the Renaissance Room podcast. And I want to start off by saying something really cool before I get into this podcast episode. Did you guys know that flamingos are actually gray and their feathers their feathers actually change over time due to the crustaceans that they eat and their diet, which consists of heavy algae. So that's what actually turns their feathers pink over time. And, they do the thing with the one leg. It's because they can actually balance and lock their knee in place. And they have this thing to where with the one leg, sticking, pulling their one leg up, they're actually able to sustain heat and regulate within their body. So it's pretty cool. But I hope you guys are doing well. A lot of things are happening lately. The racial tensions are at an all-time high, and your girl is working on something fun for you guys to follow up with me and us to connect when I'm not podcasting, and me to update and share my news, my thoughts, and the wisdom that God has given me, to you, and all for your empowerment and enlightenment. Of course, I've been doing this whole thing to inspire people, so I will be doing that. So we've got some fun stuff coming up soon. But let's go ahead and just talk about the racial tensions being at an all-time high. Oh, wait, before we get into that, can I just say this? The reason why Black people are actually struggling to create wealth and maintain and sustain financial stability is not actually due entirely to oppression. A huge part of this is actually due to the need to actually look like something when you start, right? It's this, I don't know, call it materialism, I guess you could say. I think that's actually what has our people in a chokehold now more than ever, right? It's the ability, it's not the ability, but it's this desire to look like you have something, I once heard a content creator say that people won't follow you unless you have something. I think we have to really be mindful of the advice that we take from others. Please understand that not everyone is here to lead in power, and not everyone is someone you should be following. That content creator may feel as though that's all she has to offer, and this is not really a competitive thing. It's more so just if you're someone, you have something to say, if you feel like you have a valuable product or service that you want to share with the world, you don't need to go out and buy a Benz to market your product. You know what I mean? So I just kind of want to be clear on that. And if you do feel like that's something you need to do you need to really reconsider, should you be in school to be a dentist? You know what I mean? And that's real, did God gift you in the area of scholarship? Did he gift you in the area of mathematics? I think too often we just find these images and we kind of just fall into this one track type path, and we don't realize that there's so many gifts, there's so many different ministries, and you can be whoever you want to be, of course, but you can never be somebody else. You know what I mean? So that was a little harsh truth. I'm saying it with love though, but that was a little harsh, but I hope that it penetrates to let you guys know that If you feeling like you got to do all these things to get people to buy your books or buy your products or whatever, then that's not what's for you. You don't have no grace in that area. That's not where your gift is. God says that a man's gift will make room for him, so you have to understand that, like, where your gifting is, there's anointing, right? There are people waiting to help you. There are opportunities that, God has made the way, right? Jeremiah 29:11, like, he knows the plans he has for us. So if God is giving you a gift and you have identified that gift, follow your path. Okay. But I think that's probably one of the main reasons, because, I realize how we get exposure, and I realize how our business may do well within the first year, but we don't necessarily understand taxes or, and I've seen this actually with one of the brand owners. She was a girl in Atlanta. Her products were really hot. I haven't really heard anything about it, but I mean, it was like major. And she had seen just significant success, and she went out and she posted about things that she bought. Now, at this point, I'm barking up the wrong territory. It's none of my business what she bought. I didn't see the financial, honey. I didn't see the taxes. I didn't see any documentation about her account. So let me go ahead and just step off. But I realized that there's oftentimes this pressure, you make it to the league, or you just do certain things, and there's just this pressure to go out and buy these $1,000 such and such things. I will say that I feel as though, from a materialistic standpoint, I kind of came from a privileged background. I think that, growing up, I had some things, I was really blessed to have some things growing up. It wasn't all my life that I went without. I wasn't rich by any stretch of the imagination, but I had some things. So I will say that, for me, I do believe that having that, like, stepping stone, kind of like, groundwork in regards to my foundation, I think that did set me up to be at the age in which I am now, and be searching for, like, meaning, be searching for purpose, be searching for something that just a little bit more, in depth a little bit, because I felt like I did maybe had certain things. But yeah, I think that's actually what's the hiccup here. So if you are someone like that, then just check yourself and just be real. Like, am I doing this for other people? Because, I've had my times where I went out, I bought a fresh fit, I'm looking good, girl, like, come on, I'm dripped down, and then it's like you go out and, you really could have stayed at home, and, like, you really didn't have to buy nothing, because you get there, nobody's there, you kind of disappointed. Why are you disappointed? Well, because you bought that for somebody else. You know what I mean? That wasn't for you. Now, don't get me wrong, like, it's not a matter of not looking good or not taking care of yourself or not keeping up. Like, I really believe in that, because when you look confident, especially as a woman, I was reading in this book that was about financial investments, and it just kind of talks about women and how women have emotional needs, right? And so when those emotional needs are met, especially financially, which is our beauty, our maintenance, we feel better. We feel more confident. We can go out and do certain things. We walk with our heads held high. We make better decisions. We're really solid in that. We're not, you know what I mean? So I really believe in that. But I think that we have to realize, like, the message that's being pushed, which really kind of makes me think about whether or not that's a message to just kind of, but you know what? I'm not gonna veer. So I just kind of wanted to briefly touch on this Odell Beckham situation. First and foremost, RIP to Keenan Anderson. I think it's really crazy how we say these things, like, it doesn't even hit home for us anymore. I really realize that we've been so desensitized, and I find it very interesting how it's just fascinating to see how the media is so quick to put these killings, these images in our faces. And I think it does nothing more than keep us in fear. That's, again, why I encourage you guys to really get in alignment with Jesus Christ. Give God your life and walk by the spirit of peace. And you know what I mean? You can see these things, but just understand, like, you're in the world, but you're not of it. You know what I mean? And so I pray that God definitely comforts this man's family. It was really heartbreaking because, he was an English teacher, and I know the impact that had on the kids. I think about the future generations for children, you know what I mean? And just what is it going to be like for them when all their leaders are, you know what I mean? So very, very heavy stuff. I did briefly explain a situation that happened to me prior, but I wanted to touch on this Odell Beckham story because it just came in, so it's kind of like hot. There's a video with Odell Beckham in first class. I'm not going to really go into depth about the video. You can find it on your own time. I'm just going to kind of give, I guess, my thoughts in regards to this right here. From the first hand, I think that we all know that when it comes to flying a plane, when you take off, you have to have your seatbelt on. That's just like point blank, period. And we all know that once you get in the air, you can do whatever you want. You can take your seatbelt off. You can kick back. You can eat your pretzels. You can do what you're going to do. So that's one thing, right? And I think that sometimes we have to be mindful of, not holding people accountable, and instead of, calling certain things racism, right? That's just first thing. Hear me out. Second thing, we have to realize that racism is a lot of times in subtle ways. White people and people who are in positions of power, right, will exert themselves and use unreasonable forces to try to control a situation. And that's what racism is, right? So because of the situation that happened with Odell on the plane, you have to realize that calling the security, deboarding the plane, that's racism, because it's not I'm gonna tell you what it was. It was never that serious. You know what I mean? Like, we have to realize, like, when companies and people are willing to go to extreme measures for one person, that's racism, right? Because we know that just from our own observances in life, right? Continuously, and even just like in different levels, there are some people who get a pass, and they shouldn't be getting a pass because what they're doing is dead wrong. I think one of the things that I realized for myself is when I'm in certain rooms and I'm the only black person, and, God may have called me there, or God may not have called me there. I may have put myself there out of my own, desires, whatever, right? I'm always mindful of me personally feeling like I got a magnifying glass, like someone's got a magnifying glass on me, right? So I know for me, when I'm in spaces, when I feel like I'm under a microscope, that it's just like, no, it's not happening. Like, I know that's not the space for me, because long gone are those days, period. And I realized that, again, I referenced it in the last podcast episode, but just being a black person, sometimes, you're under a microscope, and any wrong thing that you do is like, it's not a slap on the wrist. It's not a mistake. You don't get no grace. There's this expectation that is oftentimes placed on black people, which leads me to my third point. Odell's reaction to the situation, to me, I look at it more so like, even though he's older, my first concern was like, okay, does he have CTE? Because he did handle it in a way that was a little bit, immature or maybe irresponsibly. Like, he didn't seem like he had the verbiage, or he didn't really know how to move about that situation. My second thing was, with all the contracts and all the things I'm sure he had to endure as a black man to get to where he is and to be in the league and the position that he's in, right, to sustain that, I'm sure he's had to turn the other cheek several times. And so I think at some point, it comes out, and sometimes it comes out and it's channeled in the way that is categorized as this stereotypical ignorance that white people see us as. And so it's like, okay, in that sense, you're validated, right? And then my third thing was, I think that we have to be mindful of people, period, right? Who reach a certain level in their career status, whatever the case may be, and they don't want nothing to do with the black community. They don't want to date a black woman. They don't want to date, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm not going to come, because, to be honest, I think that when I look at Odell's mother, I think that his current choice of a partner kind of reflects that. And they say that men, but I don't want to veer, because at this point, this is none of my business. But I want to talk about how it isn't until black people are reminded that they're black by other races, right? It isn't until black people realize that they cannot buy their way out of racism, they cannot buy their way out of oppression, right, that they want to rally with other black people who they didn't want no association with on their way up, right? And probably still don't, So I think that for me, it's important to be mindful of that if you are someone who's in position, or if you're working hard, or whatever the case may be. And it's not to say, because we have to understand that, like, blackness is oftentimes associated with ignorance. So when you're climbing the ranks, you don't want, when you reach a certain point, you don't want to associate with black people. Like, you don't want nothing to do with black people, because you feel like it's ignorant, it's all these bad things, it's the lack, it's the deprivation, it's the scarcity, what do they call it, crabs in the barrel, like, you know what I mean? It's all these different things. And so you disassociate from that, and then you have a humbling moment where you're reminded, like, oh, I'm still seen as black. It doesn't really matter what I do. Then you want to reach out and exert yourself and ask for that helping hand from your community. And I think we have to be mindful of that. We really do, because it says a lot. I will also give grace because, again, I understand how certain contracts work, and I understand we talk about white fragility. I understand that. So I understand, like, sometimes you just can't say certain things. You can't do certain things, so I don't always think that, it's the divorcing of your culture. But I think it says a lot because, I think that there are times where, hey, we make choices. So that's what I think on the whole Odell Beckham. But yes, racial tensions are at an all-time high. I really try to keep the peace and just kind of remain in Christ and just let my peace be there and not venture too far left. But I really do love history. I love history, and I love educating my people, and I love educating people in general. I think that we've all been miseducated. The education system has definitely done a very fine job at miseducating all of us. So I think that there's a lot of this, and it's not always blatant, but it's something to think about. It's definitely something to think about. So those are my thoughts, and I hope you guys have a great day. I hope that this was somewhat revealing, healing, or something. I don't know. Again, I think it's so much of this racial war needs to be laid at the altar, because so much of this is out of our control. I once heard a pastor, which I really do like to an extent. He's dead now, but he talked about how, like, when it comes to race and just, I lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? He does talk about how, wow. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end there, because at that point, I can't remember what I was going to say. So at this point, I didn't need to say it. But yeah, it's a thing. And I think that that's what I was going to say. I was just going to say that, when we have these conversations, a lot of times people want to say that it's a hate speech from Black folks. When we're liberating one another, when we're educating one another in who we are, which is the opposite of, the media and ways in which the media portrays us, people will oftentimes take that as, oh, Black people are rallying together to hate white people. And that's where you see the rise of white lives matter. And, white people, this, and I'm oppressed, and I get this, and you know what I mean? You hear all the stories. And I think we just have to be aware and, like, mindful of that. Yeah, the pastor basically said that Black people can never be racist because we don't have the power or the authority to change anything. We don't have the power to put someone out of a job. We don't have the power to deconstruct an entire community. We don't have the power to rally. We don't even have the strength in numbers as far as community. So many of our people are suffering psychologically, whether it's from mental health or just Stockholm syndrome, whether it's from the extension of the Willie Lynch letter, and just all of the things that have taken place in this country. I don't think that we have the power, unfortunately, to be racist. So I don't really buy into that, and so, yeah, that's what I think. And I just think it's something to be mindful of. I think a lot of times when we see these people in position, we look at it like we all made it, and they don't look at it like that, and it could be, again, due to a lack of education. But I just think that we have to realize that, people make choices. And I think that a lot of times, again, it's like calling on the Black community to come and be this race ally when you feel as though you've been discriminated against, but you've pretty much dissociated from the Black community, you've made that very clear. So I think that we just have to kind of be mindful of that. And I think that, again, I tell you guys this all the time, choose your partners wisely. Make sure you have someone who understands who you are in Christ first and foremost. But if racial matters and things like that, like it matters to you and it's affected you in your life, make sure you have someone who's going to stick by your side and, like, have an opinion about things when things go down for you, when things hit the fan, and make sure you're rest assured, you know what I mean? Make sure you're comforted. Be mindful of that. I think that it's important to give grace, however, because we've all been miseducated. So there's my take, and hope you guys are having a great day. And peace be with you. Peace be with you. I'm grateful I was able to kind of make this podcast episode light, because this is a pretty heavy topic. For me, like I said, I've been shifting so much of the race wars to God, right? I talked about how I think TikTok has actually opened a portal to further show white people what they do not have, right? And it's not a matter of competition. It's a matter of, this is our culture. And that's the one thing that I think that white people have stolen into. Like, I think we just have to understand colonization. And we talk so much about the psychological, I was going to say psychosis, but the psychological warfare that is happening in Black people. We don't talk about the psychological damage of the miseducation of white people. And we don't talk about how there is a spirit of entitlement. We don't talk about how there is a spirit of colonization, which is, if I want something, I'm going to take it, right? We don't talk about the history of that and how that affects the minds of white people and why they do what they do today. And so what TikTok has done has kind of created this portal. And I think that that's not only further penetrated cultural appropriation, but I think it's created such a sense of, we can call it envy. I'm not exactly sure. I remember asking my professor one time, I said, because he thought it was a brilliant idea to sit and talk about the killing of George Floyd in one of our papers, which I understand it's news, quote unquote, in it's media. I always think that when it comes to these situations, because we see it so prevalently, we're desensitized to it. And at this point, we just it's just like, oh, this is fun. This is we don't look at it like, wow, no, this is Black people and they have been going through this for years in this country and this is crazy. So I felt as though it, hey, I'm not, from a professional standpoint, I get it, but I think just the setting and all the things that we could have talked about, it's always a matter of serving up our community and our problems as the social experiment, as the observation, rather than looking at the ways in which they and others have contributed to that. So that's my thing that I just don't always agree with. But for the sake of this podcast video, this podcast episode, I wonder though, where, psychologically, how that has affected them and how that has impacted them. And so, yeah, I think that's what I really do. I think that's what TikTok has done. And I think that that's created a space for envy. If you can't have something, you envy it, right? I remember back in the day where, their own agenda, the agenda for separation, the agenda for segregation, right? And just how we didn't have anything, right? We were redlined from housing, and we always had the spirit of love. We've always had community. And I think just seeing, back in the day, it was you couldn't get certain things. You didn't know how Black girls was wearing their hair back in the day, unless you was in those communities. And I think to see that today, it's ooh, right? We've got this, we've got that. Now we want this, right? Now we want that. And, that's why for me, when it comes to the feminist movement, what is this really about? Because it's turned into a lesbian fighting, men bashing thing, right? It's not really about liberating women. And it's interesting to me that Black women are so with this movement, and they rise so hard for it, because what do we need to be liberated from? Still to this day, Black women will never be seen as soft in the eyes of people who are miseducated, And I think that that's kind of what I want this podcast to be about. Stop trying to convince people to see you, to understand you, who are committed to misunderstanding you. Stop trying to partake in European customs and cultures and environments that do not want you there. Why are you fighting so hard to be in these spaces? Because even if you enter into these spaces, even if you buy these products, even if you do these things, if someone's committed to seeing you as an ignorant Black man or woman who is Timbuktu, you're not going to be able to rewrite that narrative for them. So, that's where we have to kind of get the priorities in order. And we have to realize that when we're pursuing certain things, and then we want to turn around and cry for a community that we negated, so it's just be mindful of that. Be intentional about your life and be intentional about your influence, because Black people have influence. I think that's another thing that, TikTok has kind of made aware. And I think that there's been a lot of wanting to take that as well. There's been a lot of false sense of integration with that as well, and yeah, I think that, when we talk about certain brands and, things of that such, would they be where they are today if they, hey, with the Kardashians, just be for real, would the Kardashians be what they are today if it wasn't for Ray J, if it wasn't for Kanye West, if it wasn't for Travis Scott? Black people have influence. And so use your influence in a way that you can be proud of, in a way that builds a sense of allegiance within your community, because it's very evident that you're always going to need your people. You're always going to need your community. And it doesn't mean let's rally together and let's just hate white people. That is not at all what I said. What I'm saying is love your brother. Love those who love you. You know what I mean? Love those who, are can understand you and understand what you're going through. And love those who don't as well. Pray for your enemies. God tells you that. I don't have no hate in my heart towards white people because, I've met people who are white and they have black friends. And I think this is the thing too. I said that in a very general and vague kind of way, but I want to elaborate on the importance of that. Because when you grow up and you're a white person, not only are you highly miseducated about black people, when you're not around black people at all, you don't know how to engage with black people. So you find yourself in a space where every black person becomes a threat to you, and you don't have an understanding of anything about us. And so instead of you having understanding, you have envy, and instead of you having appreciation, now at this point you're threatened. You know what I mean? Just be grateful for the culture. You know what I mean? Be grateful that you're in that space and you're witnessing that. And there's some harmony here. There's integration and there's inclusivity. So I think that's just the biggest thing. But these are things that we cannot rewrite, and that's why my whole thing is just telling black people, give these race wars to the Lord. Lay it on the altar. At this point, this is not our battle. We cannot continue to spend our days educating white people. We cannot continue to spend our days fighting battles that are not our own. Only God knows the hearts of a man. Only God can change the hearts of a man. You know what I mean? God breathes his spirit onto us, but he is the only person who can, detest the heart of a person and know the thoughts of a person. We don't know that. So to me, this is just it's a wasted battle, and we have to let it go. We have to lay it at the altar so that we can get in purpose and that we can do what it is that God is purposing for us to do in this hour, right? And whatever that may be for your life, but I think it's just important to, again, lay it on the altar, because it's just not our battle to fight. It's entirely time consuming. And again, why God talks about how the fool never seeks understanding. You know what I mean? If you're never seeking to educate yourself, you can't force a horse to drink water. So I want to end there, because at this point I've reiterated several times, but please understand that. Please understand that. And we got to get out of the chokehold with this materialism. That's exactly what TikTok has done for us, right? That's what TikTok has done for us. We seeing these people, they having things, they're talking about how they did this, how they did that. One thing I know for sure about sales and Instagram, a lot of people don't move the same on Instagram. Instagram is a business tool for a lot of people. Instagram is not a space in which people are coming out, being real, being authentic, sharing their personalities. I mean, you got some few and far between, but for a lot of people, it's just business. So, people coming out, having things, showing you things, they're not telling you the full story. They're not telling you how they got approved for this. They're not telling you how they got information on that, how they got a husband, how they got this, how they got money here, So you got to understand that. And there's this thing that I've always noticed is that, especially, I think that this may tie into cultural appropriation a little bit, because black people were able to rise from the ashes because of the grace of God. But, diligence, hard work, and just a strong mentality, whole lot of grace. Cannot forget that, though. I think that that's seen as noble, that's seen as honorable, because we were put so low. We were stripped of so many different things, and still is to this day, and we still rise. I think that that's incredible. You got to realize that that's a powerful force that resides within many of us, many of God's chosen people. And so when we tap into that, I think that that is what becomes a good story. Everyone wants to be the underdog, but everybody's not the underdog, And so you have people who are now admitting to having privilege about certain things. I'm seeing a lot of content creators saying how they have privilege about certain things, but a lot of people want to paint you the story about how they was the underdog and how they never had nothing and how they were just this and how they were just that. And, so that's another thing that I'm realizing, because people want to support the underdog, because there are people who genuinely have been marginalized. marginalized, but it's not the people who are coming up with these new movements. I can assure you that right now. And again, like I said, so much of what I'm talking about is current times. I think that's another thing that we fail to realize. Like, racism is not something that's in the past. Like, this is current times. It's not you coming online, sharing a video, having your opinion about something, pledging for advocacy. Like, it's what's happening to many of my brothers and sisters at work on the clock. It's what's happening to me, day to day. So I think that we just have to kind of educate white people on that. And I think another thing too, when we talk about leadership, I'm always really big on telling you guys, like, don't be so quick to, follow like everyone and let people steward over your education, over your resources, and over your insights, because, skin folk ain't always kin folk, and that's why I preach, like, being a follower of Christ, because, it's a spiritual thing. It's not really a flesh thing. Just because a person's black don't mean that makes them, someone who wants to be a part of your community, or someone who understands, or someone who's loving, or someone who has a softened heart towards you. God can use anybody, red, green, blue, purple, so that's my main thing. And that's always where I've been like centered in, but you just got to know that. And so with that being said, take that into consideration. Take heed. Take heed. It's a whole lot. It's a whole lot going on out here. So hope you guys enjoy this podcast episode, and we'll talk soon.